I think it confirmed that there aren't any mistakes. I think
Ooh, I
that's
like
what it
that.
confirmed for me.
I like that.
That my child is not a mistake. God didn't make a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. God didn't make a mistake and put him in the wrong body. Like, he is not a mistake. This was how it was meant to be.
I just have to be so honest with you. Heidi Richards is such a refreshing voice and person to talk with, probably about anything, but it obviously particularly about this particular topic. And so I wanted to stumble into the next part of our conversation, and I didn't know how to ask the question, so I asked it really awkwardly. But basically, I wanted to ask the question that I think a lot of people wonder about is, okay, so what does transgender mean in terms of how do you address this? How do you, are there people that you see and talk to and clinics and so forth? And it turns out there are. And so she helps us understand that in this second part of my conversation with Heidi Richards about parenting a transgender child on the Bishop on a Bike podcast.
The GEMS clinic is at Boston Children's, and it's the gender management. And we found out, I didn't even know it existed. Apparently, it was the first one in the United States. And now there's 40 in like various big city. Philadelphia has one. There's some in the Midwest, California. But so we didn't know about it. But I have a friend who is an Episcopal priest, and we go to his church sometimes. And he knew what we were going through with Leah because we were friends, and you talk to your friends about these things. And with the school, and he said, I have somebody in my congregation who does a lot of work with the school and does a lot of like LGBTQ advocacy. Can I put you in touch with her? Maybe she can help you. Maybe she can help you find someone to talk to, or just find some resources that will be helpful as you kind of unravel this path. So I said, sure, share my information. So this woman called me, and she was wonderful. And she gave us a bunch of information, and one of the numbers she gave us was for this GEMS clinic at Boston Children's. And so she said, call them. Who knows? They could help. So we called. There was a really long, it's like 6 months to get an appointment. It was one of those you take what you get things, because it could be 9 months, it could be a year. Like, there's just not a lot of resources for that. So we went in November. We had our appointment in November, so we had made the appointment in the summer, or the end of the summer, right when school was starting. And so we go, and Liam is 7. So at age 7, it's just meeting with a psychiatrist. So what you do is, we were there for maybe 3 or 4 hours. So they have one parent meet with the psychiatrist for like an hour, and they ask you all kinds of questions about things you've noticed in your child's history, how you're feeling like about this, what are your thoughts, worries, what questions do you have? And then we switched, so then your spouse would go in, or your co-parent, or whoever's with you, and they meet with them separately. I never asked why, but part of me thinks probably to see if you're noticing the same things, but also to see if one person is really hostile towards this idea, or one is more, accepting of this idea, because obviously
One
together,
of the two parents?
one of the two parents, because together somebody might not say, like, I have a problem with this, or it's easier to say those things by yourself. So we met separately, and then Liam went in, and they asked right away, they were very respectful. What do you want to be called? And he said, my name is Leah, but I want you to call me Liam. And they said, do you want me to say she, or he, or they, or no, I'm he. And so they wrote that down, and then they met with him by himself, and they do a combination at his age of like play and talking, drawing and talking, and then they use these rating scales, and it's very kid geared. So it's like, a line with like a gradient of color from like light to dark, and like different pictures, like a sad face and a happy face, or a boy and a girl, and they kind of ask them these questions where they fall on this continuum. Things like, the idea behind it is to get first, do they realize what their birth gender is? What is your gender? What are you? Are you a boy or a girl? And he was able to say, I'm a girl. And then, where on this where do you feel? Like, do you feel like all boy, all girl, or in the middle, kind of a little fluid, a little bit of both? And he was like, all boy. And then what are you going to be when you grow up? Are you going to be a man or a woman? And it's the same thing, kind of a rating. And he said male. And there were some other questions about like, how do you feel? What kinds of things do you like? And he came out like on the ends, like nothing was in the gray area. Like everything was solidly like boy, 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 boy. And then what they do is they have you all come in together and kind of talk about what the pieces of the puzzle together look like. They said when we went then that based on all of our conversations and the way Liam talked, they were comfortable using the transgender label. But they said, kids can change, obviously. But in their experience, having kids have gone through this program, so now this is a 20-year-old program, so a lot of these kids have gone through to adulthood, that when somebody kind of falls as solidly on one side of the line as Liam does, they've never seen them swing straight back to like heteronormative, like I'm gonna be a housewife and have children and be a woman, that they would expect that if he didn't stay solidly in the transgender area, that he would be somewhere in that spectrum. Maybe, gender fluid, where, some feminine things and some male things, but they wouldn't expect a child in their experience. They've never had anybody kind of swing all the way back.
I see. But are you saying so that in his case, but still we all have, I have certain things that are very male, traditional male about me. But I also think, for instance, I like poetry. That tends to be more feminine, traditionally, as it's been called. So we're not talking about that kind of thing.
No, not that. Kind of like the way you see yourself. If somebody said, like, how do you see yourself? Even though you like poetry, you would say male. Right. I see myself as a man. I like to watch sports, but I would still say I see myself as a woman who sometimes likes to watch sports. So more like, how do you see yourself? So he might come to see himself more, as a gender fluid person someday, maybe, who some days feels male, some days feels female, dresses as both, or might stay solidly male, but they would never see him as going towards solidly identifying as a woman. 100% wanting to be
and so that's
female.
Where you are in terms of your conversations there?
That is, yeah. So what happens in the future with them is when they're about 9 years old, they see an endocrinologist. The GEMS clinic is part of the endocrinology clinic at Boston. So when they're 9, they see an endocrinologist who will stage puberty to find out, where they are in that whole process. And what they do is, if things are still kind of looking the way they are now, that Liam is identifying as male, they use puberty blockers. So they implant something under the skin in the arm, and it essentially suppresses your hormones. And really the only purpose of it is to buy you some more time, because 9 is really young to make a decision that's going to affect your entire life. 14, if you're a 14-year-old physical girl and insisting that you're a boy, chances are you're typical, for lack of a better word, 14-year-old girl is not going to say I'm a boy. Right? That's, usually a very girly time in girls' lives. So it suppresses puberty. Now, then you continue to meet with the endocrinologist all along, and they follow you. When you get to be 14, they take it out, and if you choose to do nothing, your natural puberty would start. So whatever your birth assigned gender was, if you were a girl, when they take that out, you would begin having female puberty. It would just be later than your peers. Or you can choose to immediately go to testosterone shots at that point, in which case female puberty would never happen. So kids that do this, they would never develop as a woman. So it would negate the need for having top surgery as a transgender adult, which also negates a lot of the mental health things that come with it. Because imagine if you see yourself as one gender and then you start having the puberty related to your birth assigned gender, but what is not how you don't see yourself that way. So if a child identifies as male and then starts developing as a woman, that can be really traumatic. And that's where you see a lot of the depression and anxiety, suicidal behavior, which is really high in the trans community, coming from. But they've found by doing this, because the puberty of the other gender never happens, they can kind of get rid of that depression and anxiety from coming in, because they never have a body that's seemingly rebelling against them. So that was like a big thing to us, because, having read a lot, books and online, and talking to people who work in, LGBTQ health things, the suicide rate of the trans community was something that was like hugely frightening for me. And just like the depression and anxiety and things that came along with that. So if there's something that we can do to keep that from happening, then, that's great. So,
yeah. So this has been really quite a journey for you.
Yeah.
And how has it changed your perspective on transgender as transgender people, as a public issue in our society that it gets portrayed in all kinds of ways, mostly not helpful? So
right.
How's it changed your perspective on that?
So I might have been a little different than most, because I played roller derby, and I don't know if you know anything about the roller derby community.
No, only what I saw, like in that movie that I can't remember from the 80s.
Yeah, so it's totally different. So the roller derby community is a very inclusive community. It's a very safe community for everybody, and it's a very accepting community. So the roller derby community, it's almost, in your everyday life, just based on the number of people who identify as certain things. In any given room, it's more common, I guess, depending on where you are, but 9 times out of 10, it's more common that the majority of the people in the room are going to identify as straight, because just numbers wise, right? Just a number thing. In roller derby, it's almost the opposite. There's a lot of, gay people or bisexual people or transgender people or gender fluid people. So I had always been around a lot of people who identified as transgender. So I was comfortable with it, but I didn't know a lot about it. So I guess the bigger thing that's changed for me is I didn't know a lot about their journey getting there. Like, I knew them as adults, and I played roller derby as an adult. So I knew them as adults. They were already transitioned. I knew that they used to be a boy or used to be a girl, but now were the opposite. But I didn't know a lot about how they had gotten there. I knew some of them had, some of my friends had really sad stories with their family rejecting them, or things like that. But I didn't really know what that road was like. And now I feel like I know a little bit about that. A little bit, very little bit. But the other thing too, coming from that roller derby community, I feel super lucky because I had people I could talk to who could direct me to resources. In addition to the person I said at the church who gave us resources, I have a friend from roller derby who is trans and who works as a mental health counselor, dealing and working with the specific needs of LGBTQ youth. So I contacted them and said, can you help me, just guide me towards some resources? So I feel like we were lucky in some way of having contacts within that community already, that people were willing to help us and kind of point us in the right direction, because I think for me, I don't know where I would have turned or gone or asked, because I feel like that's something you just can't ask anybody.
Right, yeah. And how is this at home? How is this with your husband and your daughter?
Yeah, so my older daughter has adapted really well, and sometimes slips up and says she. And we talked to Liam and said, that's understandable. She's always known you as she, and it's going to take time. Just like, I always use the analogy with them, like when mommy and daddy got married. I signed the wrong name for years because, for 30 years, I had this one name, and now I don't. And the biggest thing we saw with our older daughter was some like attention-seeking behaviors, acting out,
Sure, a lot of energy
angry.
is going towards Leah.
Yes.
And so therefore, yeah.
And therefore it's not going to her. So we've, recently said to each other, we need to make sure that we carve out time for just her. Like, we go get our nails done together, or, we do like girly things together, because I think sometimes she feels a little bit left out. She's really supportive at school. It's kind of one of those things where I can be as mean to you as you want because you're my sibling, but if somebody else is mean, watch out. So she's been good. And Joe and I think I was probably more open to the idea, or maybe less frightened of the idea. Early on, I think he was more frightened of the idea, but again, it goes to what I said earlier, of if you don't know somebody in that community, you don't know that they can live, an adult life and fall in love and be married and have a family, where through roller derby, I had seen that. I knew these people that identified as transgender were married or had a significant other and had happy, fulfilling adult lives. But I think if you haven't seen that, your first thought is, they're never going to get married, they're never going to have a family, they're never going to get a job, like this is going to be horrible. And I think, as time's gone on, it's become easier for all of us to see that. And we've met some people, like through the church that we'd gone to, my friend is the priest. He also introduced us to somebody from the church. When I told my friend that the school had told Liam, you can't be a boy when you grow up, he said, there's a man in my congregation who used to be a little girl, and he'd be really happy to talk to you. So we met him at coffee hour one Sunday when we had visited his church, which was, I think, huge for Liam to see, because if you saw this man walking down the street, you would not for a second think that he was a woman at any point in his life. He just looks very male and is a man, and it was just great that people were willing to make those connections for us. And kind of, I hadn't really thought about it until actually right now, but it's really a good example of like that whole village thing. Like you need all these people in your village who are going to help you. And the hard thing is kind of turning away from people in your village who you thought you needed and were there, but then weren't there.
Yeah, that right now they're not at the point where they can be there for you.
Yeah.
Or this touches on something inside them that they don't know what to do with. And so,
yeah,
that's
so that's hard, but we've met some other awesome people.
I want to ask some couple of faith questions just to kind of wrap this up. So, you've been a Christian your whole life, Calumet, grew up in the Lutheran church, now worshiping in an Episcopal church. Has this changed your understanding of God, Jesus, in any way, or did it confirm some things? Or?
I think it confirmed that there aren't any mistakes. I think
Ooh,
that's
I like
what
that.
it confirmed for me.
I like
that my child is not a mistake. God didn't make a mistake. I didn't make a mistake. God didn't make a mistake and put him in the wrong body. Like, he is not a mistake. This was how it was meant to be. And that whole thing of no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should. Like, the people that we've met along the way, I feel like, that's where God is. Like, I don't think, and maybe I'm supposed to believe this, but I don't think there's ever going to be some big like aha moment in my life where I'm like, there is God, praise Jesus. No. But I think there's lots of little ways that God is there. Like my friend, the Episcopal priest, who said, I know some people who can help you. Or, meeting somebody like Sarah introduced us to a friend of hers who said, I heard they're going through a similar struggle with a younger child. And maybe you could connect with them and you could talk. And we met, Sarah introduced us, and we met up on a blind mom date. And we ended up getting them hooked up with the GEMS clinic in Boston and kind of helping them. I think those are the moments where God is. It's not going to be some huge like mountaintop moment in my life, like this huge glory moment, like little glory moments. Like, these people can help me. These people are there along the way. I can help them. Like none of it was a mistake and none of it's random. Like, so I think if anything, it made my faith stronger. And even like going to church with my children, and at our current church, because we haven't gone there since my kids are little, most people assume Liam is male. There are some people that we've known for longer there, or some people that just know our story who know that Liam is transgender. And they've just been so open and accepting. And even the children of the priest at the church that we're currently going to know my kids from a camp in Worcester from a few years ago. And I called their dad, the priest at this church, and I said, we're going to come to your church on Sunday, and can you just please have a conversation with your kids and just let them know that Leah is Liam now. And I don't want anything to be awkward. And he said, they're going to be fine with that, but I'll talk to them, but sure, they'll be fine. So we go to this church. It's the first time we've ever been there. We're just visiting because, our friend is there, and one of his children comes up, and she comes up to us and says, do you want to come downstairs and go to Sunday school with me? And they were like, oh, and she goes, and Liam, I love your bow tie. And this is like an 11-year-old child. So the fact that she switched so easily, where the last time she had seen my kids was at this summer camp 2 years ago when Liam had long curly hair and was called Leah, was like big to me. I'm like, wow, she was just, okay, this is who you are. So just the fact that people in the faith community, children and adults, have been so kind, makes me think like, that's where God is, like when people are being their authentic selves in a really affirming way.
Wow. I want to thank you for your openness and honesty, and
you're welcome.
And that line, God makes no mistakes, that's brought tears to my eyes. That's really beautiful. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
No, I don't think so. The one thing that people ask me, which I think is sometimes people don't want to ask this of people where they're not sure of their gender, because they don't want to be insulting, is that it's okay to ask me or an adult, like what are your pronouns? Like, to not assume. And I think that's something that sometimes people have said, like, I wanted to ask you that, but I was afraid you'd be insulted. I was afraid I'd be insulting your child, and I've asked friends who are adults who are transgender, is that insulting? Like, should I be insulted? I don't know. And they're like, no, that's a respectful thing. So, like, I think sometimes it's just you want to say the right thing and do the right thing, and you don't want to make people feel badly. But that's really affirming, I think, and it's been affirming for Liam when people say, like, can I call you he? Yes. That just it just makes him feel accepted. So I think that's a good thing. Good. Don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, that's good advice. Good advice. Well, I think this is this has been around as long as there have been human beings on the planet.
Yes.
But in our society at this particular point in time, this is new for many people.
Absolutely.
And so we're all trying to figure it out, and whenever there's trying to figure it out, there's mistakes that are going to be made, and so forth and so on. You've known that more than anybody.
Yes, I actually called Liam she at church this morning. I said something about they had gotten these little plastic trumpets at Sunday school that I was like, I hope she doesn't blow that in church. And then he looked at me and said, she, mommy? I'm like, sorry. And I had to explain, like, I'm still learning. You were my little girl for 7 years. I need to change. So.
Well, grace abounds, I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm sure. Yeah. Good. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah.